So Tom, I know we've done this before, but still, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, so my name is Tom Barbeau. I'm a strength and conditioning coach with the Carolina Panthers. Prior to Carolina, I was at Baylor University for 3 years. I was a grad student there, an intern, and then a full-time strength and conditioning coach. And before that, I was the head strength coach at Plymouth State University, which is the D3 school, for 1 year. So I had the experience coaching 16 teams, every sport, men, women, which I think was super valuable. And before that, I was an undergrad student at McGill University in Montreal.
Nice. So, first of all, like you mentioned, you've been in like the D3 school, and after I'll go to the Baylor. So, what exactly is the difference between a D3 school and a D1?
Uh, Facilities, equipment, huge difference. Um, Actually, Plymouth State has now just redone their weight room and they have a phenomenal facility. But at the time that I was there, it was six racks, really small. Everything was older, so you had to be very, very efficient with how you ran the room. And then the other thing is, out of season, the training isn't mandatory, so you are trying to make it so that the athletes want to keep coming, um, which ends up actually being easier than you would expect because they're so excited to have someone that cares about them and coaching them and trying your best. Like it didn't matter that I was 25 years old and didn't know what I was doing. Uh, Everybody was excited to just have a strength coach and have someone trying to learn with them all of those things. So I think that was the biggest difference. Also, there's just one of you for 16 teams, so how is that scheduling happening? Sometimes you're going to have multiple sports in the weight room at the same time. Maybe they lift or train less frequently than ideally they definitely train less frequently than at a big time school, but it's still I don't it's still the same, and it's awesome because they really want to learn, and they're not quite as genetically blessed for the most part. So you actually see if your program works or not, which I always would go back to as a well, if it works with them, and it's going to work with a genetically gifted athlete.
Nice, nice, love that. So, uh, for since last time we talked, you mentioned that you mainly work with athlete that return to play right now. Am I right?
Yeah, so I mean I do I'm a strength and conditioning coach as well, but especially during practice, my role is return to play. So I work very, very closely with our physical therapists, and we're in the indoor facility during practice, and we are, you know, doing all of the return to play, the field. Well, we have a crew because we just finished OTAs, so our off season training. We had 10 weeks, so we had a crew in there that is coming off, long-term surgeries from the end of the year or little nicks that have come up over the course of OTAs. They affectionately named themselves the Bubble Boys because they were in the bubble during practice. And so what we would do is we'd have, anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes in their training. And then when they're done, they'll go outside and watch the end of practice. Or, you know, as we return them to play, they'll go back and forth with certain portions of practice that they're able to do. And then they'll come back in and get the extra work that they need.
Cool. So, what kind of injury you deal with the most?
Uh, so in the NFL, you get a lot of hamstrings, groin. That I would say those are a little quad, soft tissue. Those are going to pop up all the time. Uh, then you get some blunt trauma injuries. So whether that's broken bones, concussions, uh, and then you get ankle sprains, and then this even especially this last year, like we had a rash of high ankle sprains. So that you really have to deal with differently. Um, Especially the higher up it is, it gets the syndesmosis gets separated, and it's tougher to deal with. So we had a number of those. Um, Those are probably our big ones. A couple calves are a pain. So if anybody is a listener of this show and really good at calf rehab, I'd love for you to reach out to me.
Cool. So let's talk. Let's start from the hamstring strain. How so after the hamstring strain, what would you discuss with the physio, and how would you start the rehab process or return to play process?
So what we'll do is for, depending on the severity of the injury, um, the first 2 days, is mainly, um, it was really only in the athletic training room. We'll do some EMS, so electronic muscle simulation. We'll do, soft tissue on the glute, on the calf. We'll work the rest of the body a little bit, but you don't want to do too much to increase muscle tone everywhere. Um, but just general work, put them in the pool, get them moving, sauna, hot tub, all of those things increase blood flow. You're trying to increase angiogenesis. You are trying to um, start to stimulate the repair process, especially early on. We're gonna, that's a good time to assess other structures, the pelvis, all of these things. Make sure that we know what we're going to be looking at going forwards. Then, depending on the severity, day 3, day 4, we'll start moving. So that's when they'll come to the bubble. There'll be a bubble boy. And we'll start vertical initially. So we do a ton of the dribble series. We're very influenced from Altus. So, we'll start with our ankle dribbles, our calf dribbles. If they can tolerate it, knee dribbles. We'll implement our rudiment hops as soon as it can be tolerated. All of these things are improving blood flow, improving vascularization, and coordinating the hamstring firing pattern. Because with the bicep femoris, both the long head and the short head, and the semitendinosus, semimembranosus, when you run, they don't fire at the same time. There's a specific coordination, and when you get injured and tone increases, you start to lose that coordination. So the faster we can get them back exercising, doing those movements, the faster we can start to re-coordinate or maintain the coordination. And also, you are obviously trying to increase the load bearing capability of the tissue. So then after they can handle their volume of dribbles, so that is probably maybe just a day if they do really well. We follow a protocol very similar to Derek Hansen. So we'll run our 10-yard accelerations, and we'll start 10 by 10, get up to 3 or 4 sets of 10-yard accels. So that's up to 40 10-yard accels, depending on the location of the injury as well. So muscle belly will go out, or even more distal, we'll go out. Maybe we'll run some accels on the hill because the athlete is more comfortable on the hill. The leg can't extend. It keeps the hammy safe. So we're trying to get them comfortable running, comfortable accelerating. If it's more proximal, we won't put them on the hill because there's increased bend at the hip, and that's going to have some more discomfort. So we'll run our tens though. We'll run them on the hill or flat when they can handle 3 to 4 sets of 10, and we see them moving upward of 70-75% on the GPS. We will then start our build-up progression. So that's dribble, bleed, in the run, and our build-ups are basically a fly 10, but they don't have to hold it for the full 10, right? You just build it up and then shut it off when you get going fast. And our goal is to get them to touch 90% max velocity. Then once they can safely do that, we'll put them in more sport-specific situations. So for wide receivers, that might be running routes. For defensive backs, it's doing defensive back drills, whatever the individual needs are of the athlete. And we'll then try to get them. I mean, we want them to be exposed to 90% again, hopefully throughout one of those drills. But then we'll slowly start integrating them back into practice after that when they've shown they can handle the yardage, the number of high speed efforts, the changes of direct, all of those things that we're tracking with our sports science staff.
Nice, it's nice. It seems like you combined the work from Otis and Derek Hansen, and right?
That that's exactly what we did. And then we were really lucky the last couple of weeks. We had Jordan Mendegucci in, and he really opened our eyes to the assessment, especially at the pelvis. And so that whole protocol I just went through, there's going to be some more adaptation as we implement what he's taught us. And I mean, it was phenomenal having him in. Um, and especially, you watch your guys run these buildups and or whatever it is, run their tens, and you start to see issues in the structure. Well, we'll now be able to be way more targeted in our exercises, in our weight room exercises, so that hopefully you are stopping the other issues that can potentially crop up as compensation from the hammy. Um, yeah, that's I see that coming. Um, Also, on that note, I'm ranting a little here, but it's really cool to see the work of Jordan because he is focusing so much on the pelvis. And my background, my dad does strength and conditioning, he does rehab, and he uses the pool a ton. He does deep water stuff in the pool. But the number one thing he always teaches is from the Burdenko method is pelvis stability, pelvic alignment, pelvic control. So from the time I'm 2 years old, I'm told that the pelvis is the most important thing in movement. And then I'm 30 years old and we're bringing in a world renowned hamstring specialist and he's telling me the pelvis is the most important thing. And I'm saying, okay, what are you teaching me? What do I know? How am I mixing these things? Um, Clearly, my dad was correct many years ago.
Nice, I love that. Um, uh, so like, want to ask about like the pelvis. So, since it's American football, let's say like wide receiver or like running back, they they tend to have a lot of like high speed running and tons of like change of direction. So when no matter it's like return to play or like watching them sprinting, uh is there like certain movement that we should be observing or we should be seeing on the pelvis?
So they are running a lot, and we know that as the season goes on, anterior pelvic tilt is going to increase. That is a risk factor of hamstring injury. Other risk factors are lateral bending. Um, they're the listing of the hips. Now, some of these are hamstring risk factors, but it's also just injury risk in general. Like you see these compensatory patterns, and this doesn't look right. Um, I think that a couple things. One, you do want to try to minimize the anterior pelvic tilt. So whether that's mobility strengthening, abdominal strengthening, glute strengthening, and the awareness, because a lot of these athletes have no idea where their pelvis is in space. It's stuck anteriorly rotated. It is there's no ability to get in and out of that extended posture. And that's where I think you end up getting pain, you get back pain, you get injury, right? You get injury risk. So it's first it's making them aware of where their pelvis is in relation to their ribs, in relation to the rest of their body. That's balance. That's, you know, pelvic control. And then it's strengthening it so that they can get in and out of those positions. Because the other thing is, like, sometimes they're going to be in an anterior rotation, but they need to be robust enough that they don't explode the first time they're there. And they need to be able to get in and out of it so that when they go home and pick up their kids, they're not always in that posture. And, that's just increasing fatigue, increasing soreness, increasing all, it's deepening the attractor state that is an anteriorly rotated pelvis.
Nice. Um, since like uh like your dad mentioned, or like the conference you guys did, why exactly does like pelvis like influence the hamstring a lot?
Uh, so when the pelvis rotates, then one, the hamstrings are automatically put on stretch, right? Because their attachment. Also, as you sprint, there is a firing pattern of opposite hip flexor, psoas, iliopsoas. Then, this side, the hamstring is extending. So this pattern baked in with the position of the pelvis is going to affect the stretch put on the hamstring right before it hits the ground. So then, as fatigue happens, I start to rotate more. I start to get more forward trunk lean, and I'm getting more and more at risk. So you also asked, like, what are we looking for? Well, as I'm watching an athlete run, I'm looking at the knee height, there with each step. Um, that also is going to let them increase thigh angular velocity. They're able to hit the ground harder. They're able to, I think Peter Whalen, and they talk about this spike that elite sprinters show, um, and ground contact force, right? It's not supposed to be a steady, constant application of force. It is a hammer into the ground. Jonas Dodu says whip from the hip, right? We're trying to hit the hammer into the ground. So one, I'm looking at knee drive. Two, I'm looking at knee separation on touchdown, right? So as the on ground contact, I want to see that the knees are basically next to each other. As the leg swinging through is further and further and further back, that's increased backside mechanics, and that's a risk of soft tissue injury.
Cool. So, let's say, what happens if an athlete have like their hip was rotated? So what would you do to help them like maintain the posture?
So some easy kind of quick fixes are the muscle energy technique. So that's something our athletic trainers will do with guys pre-practice. They'll check them quickly, and then that's a quick fix. I can't speak on how long that lasts for, or you know how well it. I mean, it works at least to get you through a practice if something's really off. But long term, to get them out of a severe anteriorly rotated posture, decrease anterior pelvic tilt, you're going to have to increase the strength of the glutes, not just at the top, not just in a hip thrust, but through full range of motion. You're going to have to increase abdominal strength. So that's, all sorts of things where you're thinking about keeping the spine pressed into the ground. That's also going to increase that awareness. The athlete doesn't even know that their back is arching when they're trying to do a core exercise. And then all of a sudden you make them aware, and now they're shaking after 5 seconds, right? Um, so you're gonna do those. You can, side planks, rolling planks, um, all sorts of stuff. Strengthen the psoas, um, strengthen the hip flexors, uh, all well being aware. Well, you can do things like reaching the arms, and that when you reach the arms forwards, protract the shoulder blade, you end up getting the rib cage to move back. The ribs are on top of the hips. That's a better posture. That's better alignment. um, so all sorts of stuff like that in biasing your exercises.
Nice. So, uh, what exactly did it feel like when you have a dad that works in strength and conditioning and rehab? And you,
uh,
and after graduate from college, you also work with strength and conditioning.
so one thing I forgot on the last one, also sprint drills are a great way. We're doing our A skips, our dribbles, all these things. That's strengthening, and they're aware of their postures, running wickets, all of these things. So it's actually really funny. So my dad learned under Dr. Igor Burdenko, who's a Russian gentleman, worked in the Soviet Sport Federation, and then he defected to Boston. My parents met him in New Hampshire, and when my mom was pregnant with me, my dad was learning. The two of them were learning from Dr. Burdenko. So there's video of me as a baby, and Dr. Burdenko is having me kick one leg, the other leg, both legs, doing all this coordination work. Um, and then for as long as I can remember, we would just do exercise as a family. I would work out with my dad. Um, I said he does a lot of deep water pool stuff, flotation. We'd go on vacation and we'd bring our exercise stuff, and we'd be standing on these flotation barbells in the deep end of the pool trying to joust and kick each other off. Like, that was just what the family business has always been. My aunt is actually an athletic director as well, so it's really, sports in the family business. My dad and my aunt work out together every single day, and they kick the shit out of themselves. It's impressive. They have a flywheel in the basement that they work out on, all sorts of stuff. It's fantastic. Um, but it's also the other thing, you ask what it was like, where I remember being at the mall and sitting with my dad, and we would just watch people walk by and look at their posture. And I'm 8 years old, and we're watching someone walk in the way their foot's sitting, right? So I never even considered doing anything else. Like, I was just going to be a strength coach. That's it. Um, Now it's really cool because we use the pool, we use the Burdenko method. I use these exercises every day still in the warm up. Um, our head strength coach, Coach Scott, loves the stuff, so he has it mixed into workouts, into the warm ups. My dad has come down as a consultant before, so it's really really cool. It makes for a really nice family business, I would say.
Cool. So did your dad like work with pro athletes before?
Yeah, so he coached. So he's a downhill ski racing coach. And then growing up, when girls on the Canadian or the U.S. ski team would like tear their ACLs, they would come and live at our house and do some of their rehab. And then he coached for Team Canada in 1988. Then he coached in the 98 and 2002 Olympics. So yeah, so legit downhill ski racing.
Nice, nice.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Completely different world it's than I'm in though. It's funny. My aunt was a ski racing coach. My dad was a ski racing coach. My mom is a swimming coach. But I played basketball, and then now I work in football. My dad played football, but didn't worked with it a little, but not as much.
Cool. So you must learn a lot from your dad about like ACL reconstruction, that kind of stuff, or like you mentioned, like pelvis or hamstring strain.
So, yeah, tons. We would always have, the one thing that he always harped on that I think is so true as well as you have an ACL or you have a hamstring, whatever the injury is, it's a great opportunity to fix all the other problems because the nervous system is going to adapt to the greatest stimulus. So when it is football season, it's so hard to fix, borderline impossible to fix, not impossible, but really really hard to fix pelvic positioning, really hard to fix whatever a mobility issue is, right? Whatever a compensation is, because they're going out and using it every single day. So that's where one of the lessons I really learned was I have this injured athlete. Yeah, their ankle is hurt, but I'm going to train the knee, the quads, the hips, the back, rotation, balance, coordination, flexibility, endurance, all of these things because this is a great time to improve everything else. And what's going to make me heal faster than improving all of those things? Of course, I'm going to heal better. I'm going to have better blood flow. I'm going to have everything that stimulates healing.
Cool. Next time I'm gonna have your family off.
You should.
So, uh, want to go back to like the pelvis and the hamstring. So, like you mentioned, uh, you're gonna observe like how the pelvis move. So, it is team sport athlete like football players when they sprint, when they do like high speed running, is the pelvis posture gonna be the same with like sprinters?
Uh, it's going to end up being a little different. So sprinters will have a higher knee lift. They will display better front side mechanics. Part of that is because they practice it more and it is their sport, and it's not something that is coached as well from younger ages in team sports. Um, a lot of times an athlete's really fast, so nobody ever coaches them because they're faster than everybody else. And you don't need to coach that athlete to make them faster. You need to coach that athlete to make them survive, to make them last longer, right? Like that's the goal. We're trying to increase, we're trying to improve these sprint mechanics to improve durability, not necessarily to improve performance. Now, there's also a caveat in all of this. In team sports, they have to change direction more. So there is an advantage of the legs being lower to the ground, the feet staying lower, uh, and then seeing the cuts. But once the cut is made, then ideally the athlete gets up in the top end mechanics, stays safer,
Cool.
and goes faster.
So since it's a little different, and the sports demand is a little bit different, are you gonna are you gonna try to coach them to like lift the knee higher, or like do some try to do anything like that their pelvis posture gonna be probably more like sprinters?
I'm still going to coach them to be like that. We're still going to coach them to run that way because it is a more effective and efficient posture. Um, and we're still going to coach them to run that way because we're getting so many benefits everywhere else just from running fast and running fast properly, right? When you coach them to run properly, when they're running through the wickets, you're improving all of these qualities, all of this coordination, the strength, all of these, right? Everything is improving. And then you're putting incredible amounts of load in short amount of time. You're improving elasticity. You're moving through full range of motion. So doing this is going to be beneficial to the sport. And you are vaccinating them to the efforts and everything they're going to face while they're in practice.
So is there some certain cue you're gonna use to coach it? Is it is it just directly as you mentioned, like lift the knee higher, or like any certain cues?
Uh, mm, it's going to depend on the athlete. It's going to depend on um, what they specifically need, right? So a lot of times we'll do the dribble bleeds in a run because the sprint is just the elongated knee dribble. So you start small and it just keeps getting bigger, 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 longer, 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 and eventually I'm sprinting. So the other thing is, I'm big on the language of coaching. So lift your knee higher doesn't really mean anything to the athlete, right? Like higher compared to what? How high is through the ceiling high enough? Not really. Um, so again, that's why I like that knee dribble because they know close to how high it's supposed to be. And you could say, hey, you know how it felt on the knee dribble. I want you to feel that again. Um, Also, it can be cueing them to punch their knees through the front wall. It can be cueing them to punch the knees through the lights if there are lights up at 45 degrees. Um, and then for some athletes, it isn't about getting the knees up. It's about hitting the ground harder. And if they hit the ground hard enough, so if they whip from the hip, if they hammer into the ground, then reflexively the knee is actually just going to bounce back up high enough. Um, if an athlete is super backside and butt kicking, then it's impossible for them to spend enough time in the air to get the knee high enough. So maybe you have to fix something else on the backside. Maybe you have to fix whatever it may be to get them into some bandwidth that looks how you want it to look.
So it's like you mentioned, since we're watching like the pelvis from like when the athlete probably have more time when they have like no matter it's like ACL injury or like hamstring injury, you have more time to like teach them or like to rebuild whatever they need to like change.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like certain drill like besides like I know there's like French bosses like hip lock that kind of stuff. Do you kind of like implement it into like your warm up or
Yeah, so we will implement some Franz Bosch stuff. I really like the ideas. I really like the exercises for increasing pelvic awareness, pelvic stability. Um, we'll do some A marches where we teach it. We'll do some Jonas Dodu has some acceleration drills where it's kind of like a modified wall drill, and something we'll cue is getting that in that position. We've done some hip lock drills on the wall with athletes, so med ball punches as they get up into the hip lock, and you're creating stability. You do the same thing falling backwards on the wall, trying to create stability depending on where the athlete is weak, where they need. Um, Something else that's interesting, as you get the pelvis to roll back into a more neutral position, you actually increase the height of the hip lock because, you know, the body requires all three planes. If you are stuck in the sagittal plane, then you cannot get enough frontal or transverse plane movement as you want. Coach Path always talks about how, as an athlete sprints, the hips undulate and oscillate. They match the shoulders, or the shoulders match the hips, whichever the chicken or the egg. Right? They match each other. They match each other. Um, but if the athlete is super stuck, then it's not. You're not going to get the same rotation. You're not going to get the same hip lock height. So I do. That's something interesting to consider. Um, but yeah, so we'll do some of those things in the warm up all the time, and for different injuries, we'll do them too. You have an athlete who is recovering from an ankle, and they're having a hard time decelerating. Well, now they're compensating in the hip, so doing some hip lock work, trying to make that a very stable position, is going to help as you get because you don't want them to keep this pattern that they've created around the ankle once the ankle is fixed.
cool? So besides like hip lock, besides like the modified like wall drill or like some sort or like sprint drill you guys use, is there like any certain like exercise or like any certain movement you uh you're you like from you like to do? It's from like the Francois system.
Um, we'll do some of the single leg Roman chair stuff with the drop catches. I really like his core stuff, his rotational core that's fast. Sideways in the glute ham raise when you reach the GHD, whatever you call it, the hyper, where you punch that overhead or punch it straight out. I really like all of that stuff for the core. There was, reading his strength training and coordination book, then that one really, really got me thinking because he's talking about core training, calf training, and he's like, well, you go out and do 30 sit-ups and you get sore, but when you sprint, it's way more force going through the abs. So is are the abs weak, or did you just choose a bad exercise? And that's something that really had me thinking, like, how am I preparing the athletes? What exercises are needed? I probably need things that happen more reflexively. Um, so we try to mix them in. It doesn't have to all be one or the other. There's some value in stir the pot, of course, because I'm cueing good hip position. I'm cueing a good brace of the abs. I'm getting the limbs moving while the torso is stable. But then I also need to rotate really fast. I need to rotate and stop. So there's stuff like that too. We do like a lunge position plate chop where they're just ripping a 10-pound plate back and forth really fast. I love that type of stuff. That's not necessarily a front boss drill, but the thought process.
Cool. So, uh, like you mentioned, uh, as an 8 year old, you sit with your dad at the mall watching all kinds of like posture, and your dad always talk about like pelvis. And there's like some conference, no matter like from Jonas Daldu, no matter like Dan Path, they mention a lot of like pelvis. So, does that like sort of like help you grow as a strength coach?
Yes, I think that having intellectual curiosity means that you are always trying to figure out new things or figure out things that are wrong. But sometimes you need to know the things that are right. And you hear the same thing enough from people that you trust, and you say, you know what, this is probably right. And then it lets you be grounded in your system or your thought process or your philosophy. Um, so that would be huge for me. Like it's something I need to keep learning about, keep getting better seeing, keep getting better at assessing, of course. But I know that it is something that is always correct and something that's always going to be extremely important.
Cool. Is there a certain time that probably you have some like problem deal with like athletes or like the athlete you train, and you kind of like consult with your dad or your aunt?
Um, yeah, for sure. Um, I'll talk to my dad. So because of the pool stuff, we use the pool and we go. So it's in the deep water, and you wear flotation vest, belt, and you're moving forwards, backwards, sideways. There's barbell, like flotation barbells, all sorts of stuff. Um, and I'll talk to him all the time, going to and from the pool. You know, we have this problem today. What what would you do in this situation? How would you handle this? You know, he he's always making up new exercises. It's unbelievable, the creativity. So it'll be, you know, every day that we talk, he's tried something new that day that I should try and see what I like. See, you know, then there's always a chance that something else is going to work better. And then even they've come down, he's come down as a consultant before and helped and watched me with athletes, helped with athletes. So it's fantastic.
So it so strength and condition is the conversation you have when you guys have dinner, right?
Oh yes, all the time. It's the two of us are very have very few interests outside of it, so it's good. We have fun conversations, but it always comes back to the training, what he's doing for training, what he's doing with his athletes, what I'm doing with my athletes. It's
Cool. So want to go back before it end. I want to go back to like the hamstring injury or the pelvis you mentioned. So after like the hamstring injury, after the dribble bleeds, after the acceleration and uh like some routes they run, is there like or like when do you guys start to like implement like heavy strength training for these injured athlete or like return play athletes?
so it's pretty much baked into the day. They'll come and lift during their normal training times, and we'll just have modified workouts for them. So modified training. So sorry, we'll have modified training for them. So you know, at first you just don't train the limb cross education, and then as they're prepared, you do what they can do. So maybe it's a, you know, a body weight single leg RDL to start, or uh, rollouts or isometric holds, tons of isometrics initially. That's the real answer. As you know, 3 days out, you can start trying to load them isometrically, and then depending on if it's tendon or just muscle, uh, you'll switch to, you know, more traditional loading, eccentrics. Um, but we definitely load them with isometrics initially. Um, but it's just in their schedule as they're prepared, and then before you know it, they're back to normal. Maybe they have a little extra, in their needs bucket, a little extra that they need from profiling, from assessment. But it's right away.
Cool,
Give them 2 days, and
cool. So, uh, as strength coach or like strength and conditioning or like rehab, that's a family business for you guys. So, what is the like you personally? Is there like a goal, like career goal for you as as a strength coach?
uh, I think I would probably like to be a head strength and conditioning coach. Probably in the NFL. I really, really enjoy working in the NFL. I enjoy the players I work with. I enjoy that it is the primary goal of everybody in the building is the best performance possible, putting the best product on the field. Um, I could also see myself down the road, opening my own type of facility or something else to get to do absolutely everything you want. But I don't know if that's I don't really know. I tend to think about I think about tomorrow, and I worry about tomorrow, and then you have some plans, but nothing matters if tomorrow goes poorly. So that's just the way I've worked, and it's luckily worked well for me. Um,
Cool,
obviously, you have the thoughts, but
cool, cool. So, uh, it's an interesting conversation today. I'm sorry, kind of like drop all over the place. I'm sorry about that. But
no problem.
but for those who are interested in what we're talking about today, no matter it's like pelvis, no matter it's like hamstring injury or like a little bit French spot system, where can they reach out to you?
I'm on Instagram and Twitter, Barbeau Training. It's probably the best. I check both regularly, so easy to get a hold of me there. You can email me, thomas.barbeau at panthers.nfl.com. But yeah, the social media is easier. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, Thomas Barbeau, I think. So, yes, all of that. Yes. And if you know a lot about calves, talk to me, please.
Great, man. Great.
Yes. 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 Thank you. It's been fun. It's always